You know how I see things, the lens I look at USC through, but how about we get an opinion from somebody who's from the land of the SEC and the ACC, that part of the country?
You are Locked On USC, your daily podcast on the USC Trojans, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, fight on, everyone. I'm your host, Mark Culkin, and thank you for making Locked On USC part of the Locked On Network your first listen every day. Whether you're watching the show on YouTube, you can pick your platform. You can download this podcast. It's always free, and I always appreciate your support. So we got a special guest today. I wanted to give USC fans the chance to get a kind of a national perspective, rather than looking at everything through the lens of Mark Culkin, through the Cardinal and Gold lens. So I brought on Brian Smith. He hosts a couple shows on Locked On. He's got the Portal, which is all about NIL and transfers and recruiting, and he's the host of Locked On Seminoles, Florida State. So Brian has also been in the industry. He follows recruiting, he covers it, he evaluates, kind of has his finger on the pulse of the recruiting world. So I thought he'd be the perfect guest to bring on, give everybody a great idea of how people view USC. So Brian, welcome to the show.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah. Let's just get right into this. Lincoln Riley, his staff, they love to recruit down south. I mean, you look at their 2026 class right now. Xavier Griffin, highest rated recruit in the class. He's from the state of Georgia. Why do you think, why do you think it is that players from that part of the country like coming to USC? What's the appeal of USC?
I think a lot of it's California. Just from talking to kids, they're curious about it. Some have family there. Some of them have family members and/or coaches that remember the Reggie Bush days. There's a lot of odd connections, and some even have just a connection because they lived there at one point themselves and they've moved different places. A lot of kids are transient down south now. It's a big hotbed, especially like Atlanta and the state of Florida. So there are many different connections to it. And let's not forget, USC is still USC football. It's not like they don't know where it's at. So USC has NIL money. They have playing time to sell. There's a lot of different things to look at. And when you add it up, if you take a kid to LA for a visit, I mean, I've been to LA numerous times. It's a fun city. So the visit's easy. Now the question is, can they hold on to them? They've struggled to do that in most years. They get a few, but that's the key. I still believe they should recruit more locally than they do, but at the same time, adding Xavier Griffin's not a bad thing.
No, absolutely not. So on that note, what is the overall, you said that USC is still USC, but what is the overall sentiment of USC's program today? Like I said, you're down there in the land of SEC, y'all, and the ACC in Texas. Where is USC? Are they one of those, well, maybe they can do it again, or has time passed them by?
I think it really depends on the coach. I say this for every program. I forget when it was. I don't know, maybe 2018, 19, 20, somewhere in there when Harbaugh was struggling with Ohio State. Oh, he'll never get it done. Okay, well, I mean, he might have cheated to get there, but he got it done. Notre Dame's done. They're never going to get it done. USC, I remember 2000. Oh, they're done. Notre Dame went there and beat the crap out of them. Yeah, that wasn't accurate. If you get the right head coach,
right,
name brands, it's amazing. Pete Carroll was a good coach. Did you know that? It works out. You got to have the right fit for your program. It's ironic because Pete was like USC's fourth choice or something.
He came asked for the job. He wasn't even on their choice list.
That's what I mean. You just don't know, but sometimes you got to have that. And he had a fire and a passion that kind of ironically he still has a lot of. He's a very positive guy. So that fit the Los Angeles mantra. Lincoln Riley put Oklahoma on the map with that offense.
Okay.
Everybody knows that. And a lot of kids were curious about it, especially receivers, etc. There's been a little bit of a drop off in interest in terms of believing it's going to get done because they went, 75, 76 last year, whatever it was. They need to see it now. I was a little surprised that Griffin committed, but I asked somebody about it, and I was told that he really likes the staff, and I'm sure his NIL package is good, but he will. he wants to be different. He's from maybe 30 minutes away from Atlanta, 35 minutes. So he's right in UGA's backyard. He's maybe 50 minutes from UGA, but he still picked SC, and he could have picked Georgia, Tennessee, Georgia Tech, Florida State. Could have picked a number of schools closer to him. Every kid's a little different. If they can just get 2, 3, maybe 4 kids a year from east of the Mississippi, obviously the South is a priority, they're good because you'll get 2 or 3. I mean, Riley, 2 or 3 is probably a low number for the Lone Star State. 5 kids from Texas, 8 to 10 from California. Then they can just kind of cherry pick everywhere else and then use the portal. They'll be top 12 class every year. But it's weird with the down south. You don't know who it's going to be. They offer a ton of kids, but the ones that like it really do. So if I'm SC, you just got to keep dropping the bombs. You don't know where they're going to go off at, but Xavier Griffin's an example. You can still hit big in Dixie.
Yeah, and that's the thing is, USC, especially in with this recruiting cycle, they don't really need to stray too far from their own yard.
It's a great class in California this year. It really is.
So if you can go out and you can pluck, one of the top peaches out of Kirby Smart's backyard, hey, great. But you don't have. I guess, is Lincoln Riley now starting to focus more locally compared to the way he was kind of shotgun blasting across the country his first, 2-3 years? He had to really utilize the transfer portal. And then when you look at his recruiting class last year, I think just 30, maybe close to not even 40% of the recruits were from California. The vast majority were from, 1,200 miles away. So, is it a matter of not appreciating what California has to offer, or just his comfort zone is he knows the whole Texas Panhandle, Southeast recruiting market better?
If for those who don't remember, he's coached at East Carolina, so he knows Tennessee, Georgia, right. He knows that corridor, and everybody recruits Florida, whether they want to. Pete Carroll recruited Florida, so I think it's a combination of things. A, he's got relationships there. B, the talent's gross. And probably C, the one that people forget about. Speaking of relationships, how many guys on his staff have coached in the state of Florida or Georgia or Tennessee, so that have recruited those areas? Even if they didn't live there, they got assigned to it and they get accustomed to it. Recruiting is about relationships. Again, they only need 2, 3, maybe 4 guys east of the Mississippi to have a top 10 class. That's what Pete Carroll did. It worked out pretty darn good. So
you're preaching to the choir on that one right now. Absolutely.
So I don't think that he doesn't like California, but he's got those connections. And then Texas, he knows everybody because OU is almost identical distance to Dallas as UT is. It's maybe like a half-hour difference. So Dallas, he probably knows better than anybody. And you could make an argument in terms of impact guys. That's the best city in the country because the training's so good there. Their high school facilities in Dallas are similar to NFL. It's gross. Like I've been to some of it's not definable unless you see it with your own eyes. So I think that's one of the reasons he goes and gets Texas running backs, etc. Oh my God, he's a 3-star, but he played right away at Oregon or Texas or US. It's different there. So I totally get the Texas thing. The east of the Mississippi is just connections.
Sure. I think what gets USC fans a little confused is they'll see, a running back or a wide receiver that's good enough for Ohio State or, for a different school, but USC shows minimal interest. And it's just like, where is that? What's the philosophy behind it? So again, is it a relationship thing where I can tell you that they've made ever since they bolstered their front office with Chad Bowden, with the general manager, and they brought in Chad Savage as the new inside wide receiver tight end coach. It's all relationship based, and they're really making a focus, and they're going to really try and emphasize their backyard now. So I'm hoping to see that transition come to fruition, so to speak.
I would say this is the best year in California in a decade, so they need to make it happen.
Absolutely, they got to stop losing those battles. You mentioned 3-star, 4-star. My everyday listeners know how I feel about the star rankings. I'm not a huge stargazer. I come from show me the programs that are interested in you, and then I know if you've got talent and if you're one of those elite type of players, or players who are anticipated to maybe even get to the NFL. I guess the 4-star level. What are your thoughts on the star rankings? Are they are they good for the recruits, or is it kind of like a yoke around their neck? Because you're great when you've got that 4 and 5 star, but when you don't produce, all of a sudden you're a bust, and everybody starts that whole conversation.
The biggest thing with rankings that people have to realize, it's just like the real estate market: location, location, location. Me and almost everybody in the recruiting industry, outside of someone like Biggins, who's out there in Cali, been around forever.
Right.
We live down south because it's the most concentrated area for 7-on-7, Under Armour camps, and just camps in general. So it's the easiest way to recruit. So like I was talking to somebody earlier. There's a kid that's going to Arizona State that's from New Mexico. Nobody's recruiting New Mexico here. Seriously. He's the exception to the rule. He's the one kid like he was really good.
Right.
One kid. Like when I lived in Tampa, I could throw a rock and I'd hit a 3-star corner.
Right.
Okay. It's different. So I think the star rankings, you have to put it in perspective where kids are. Like if a kid's a 4-star in Iowa, that kid's probably like insanely good, because nobody scouts Iowa, like in my industry. LA kid that's ranked 4-star. Okay. That's not shocking. Biggins and everybody else knows about him by the time he's 15.
Right.
But when you get into the sticks and you're a 3-star, don't worry about it. You got to get to camps and stuff. The kids that haven't been, they're not going to rank you until they've seen you with their own eyes. I know that's not fair, but that's how it works. So you got to be kind of looking at it from a realistic perspective. And that's why you'll see like Iowa puts more DBs in the NFL, almost anybody. And they got great coaching, but they only take 3-star kids. Well, they take a lot of kids locally. Who's scouting there in my industry? Nobody.
Right.
So it depends on the situation. It's really hard to explain otherwise, though.
Yeah, sometimes I just wonder about the, I call it the Alabama or the USC or the Ohio State effect. Once that program shows interest in someone who might be like a 3-star, all of a sudden
he's a 4-star.
So again, it's such a subjective. It's really opinion-based. You're projecting. You're comparing, offensive linemen to defensive backs, running backs, and quarterbacks. They all have their own unique, I guess, intangibles that you're looking at when you're making those rankings going forward. So,
yeah,
I just wanted to kind of get your opinion on that, because you obviously I don't know if you do the rankings, but you obviously
I do some of my own, but I help with some other companies and stuff, and we argue all the time. I know Will Pong and John Garcia is my best friend. I know all the people, Andrew Ivins. We all text. We all have different opinions, but it's hard because when I see a kid on a Friday night, he might go crazy. And then 2 weeks later, when like Andrew goes and sees him, he's got a hurt ankle. He has no opinion. There's nothing I can do. I can send him a couple of clips, but it's not the same as him being there. So it's really, really hard. You're absolutely right.
Yeah, it's always been fascinating to me. All right, let's we got a couple more segments to go. Let's do this. This is a message from our sponsor, Intuit TurboTax. Taxes was dealing with piles of paperwork and frustrating forms, and then waiting and wondering and worrying if you were going to get any money back. Now, taxes is easy, uploading your forms to a TurboTax expert who's matched to your unique tax situation. An expert who's backed by the latest technology, which cross-checks millions of data points for 100% accuracy. While they work on your taxes, you get real-time updates on their progress, and you get the most money back guaranteed. And all while you're going about your day, no stressing, no worrying, no waiting. Get an expert now on TurboTax.com. Only available with TurboTax Live Full Service, real-time updates, only in the iOS mobile app. See guarantee details at TurboTax.com/guarantees. All right, so let's get more specific about USC. What's been the biggest reason, and again, we're going to stay with recruiting. What's been the biggest reason for USC losing so many local recruiting battles these last couple of years?
I think it's something you hinted at earlier in the show. They want to be adored. They want to have the focal point, etc. And then on the back end of that, let's just call it what it is. Which schools are they really losing them to? Bama, Ohio State. Notre Dame or Michigan's always gotten a few kids out of Cali. But the Southeast has changed everything. Nico and all that. Their NIL money and their facilities, and they're just nothing else matters but football mentality. I mean, I live in Alabama. You can't explain it to somebody unless you live here. Nonstop. 24/7, every day of the year, they talk about the Iron Bowl, stuff like that. It's just different here. They don't have the same options entertainment wise, and the recruits want to be in that. California kids, I think they feel left out a little bit because the Pac-12, I mean, it going away didn't help, but there's different ways to look at it. And USC could still sell it. Now you're in a better league. That's how I would sell it.
Sure.
But some of these kids, they see what's going on in the SEC. They want to leave. For some reason, kids don't mind going as far as they used to. I think part of it's the internet, cell phones and stuff. But it used to be out of the top, let's say 12, 15 kids in California in the 80s, early 90s. One or two might go to a Notre Dame or a Texas or Michigan, but UCLA and USC kicked the crap out of everybody in recruiting. They both had top 8 classes every year. UCLA at one point might have even been better at recruiting than USC, but those two they dominated. The kids just didn't want to leave. Now it's just polar opposite. Culture, I mean, it's a lot of things all involved together.
Yeah, it's the culture part of it, and it's kind of like the perfect storm came together with NIL, the transfer portal, USC not pulling their own weight as far as winning games, looking and playing like USC. We're all of a sudden now, we talk about how players aren't afraid to go across the country. It's a lot easier to go across the country,
yes,
when you got a nice fat bank account and you're living comfortable in your own, whatever studio, apartment, condo, you're driving around a car, you feel comfortable, and you've got that get out of jail free card, so to speak. If you don't like it, I can jump in the transfer portal and I can come
big
closer.
factor.
I can come back home. So I think that whole thing plays into it. So I'm wondering now, with USC really bolstering their front office, they went and they took Chad Bowden away from Notre Dame. It's the way college football is shifting to the NFL model. At least that's my impression. How important is a general manager to recruiting? And do you want to take that away, or take some of that away from your head coach, from your coaching staff, so they can focus on the X's and O's? What's your take on this whole shift?
I think it depends on the coach. I'll give you two different scenarios. Bill Belichick ain't dealing with NIL directly. 0% chance. We all knew that. They got somebody in an office that's taking care of it. On the other side, although he has better things to do, any younger coach like Dillingham at Arizona State, probably more equipped to deal with it. He's 34 years old. He doesn't turn 35 till later this year. Marcus Freeman's like 39. Right. Those guys at least somewhat, but they still need to be doing X's and O's in dealing with actual recruiting. Hugh Freeze said one day at a press conference, one of the biggest things that he does is put out fires. Before anybody asked him what that meant, I knew what it meant. That meant some idiot that claims to be the third uncle of a player wants more money that's on the roster. That's where Chad Bowden comes in. You looked really tired last year towards the end of the year. They were struggling anyway at Auburn, but it was that crap that was the biggest problem. And Auburn's got insane NIL. Their money's really deep. But that doesn't mean people aren't always asking for something. It's just annoying. So from that perspective, older coaches, guys over 50, especially over 55, I think the GM's more important. And because they're going to burn out, and or they're just going to screw this. They're going to do what Chip did and get out. You're going to see a lot of coaches. They're not going to deal with it. The guy at Wake Forest just left, etc. If you don't have a good GM and you're not willing to spend, USC went nuts for Chad to spend on him. If you don't have somebody like that's good at not just having one, really good at it to help the coach not deal with that crap, you're going to see college coaching really diminish. Like the guy, I had a conversation with somebody recently that covers Georgia. We're not so sure Kirby will be around long, because Kirby's pretty old school. He's just almost 50, but he's more like a 70-year-old in how he thinks. He's very conservative with his thought processes on being able to control things because he's from Nick Saban's tree. That's his protege. If he was done in 3 years, it wouldn't shock me because he doesn't have the same control. He can't keep the same roster anymore. They don't have anywhere near the depth they used to because kids leave. That's where your general manager is so important. You can argue it's the second most important position in a program at certain schools. Maybe not SC, but especially at a school like Texas Tech, who's had an uprising. They've got a great G. Without him, they have no chance. They have no chance. SC, it's a little easier. Notre Dame, Georgia, it's a little easier because the brand. But the GM position, again, those older guys, if you ain't got the right guy, you ain't going to have your head coach long because they don't want to deal with this stuff at all.
Yeah, and ironically, Lincoln Riley falls into that young
Yeah,
man.
yeah.
I mean, he's still what 40 years old, and it's almost like it's almost like they're looking ahead. You know what? Let's just get ahead of the game now. Lincoln, you're still going to be our closer. You will make sure you're recruiting certain guys, but you know what? Focus on the team. Now you got a GM who can do the talent evaluation. We'll put up on our big board. These are the guys we're focused on, and we'll build the roster that way. Again, I guess which leads me to my next question. If they go to a 105-man roster, and this doesn't have to be a real long, detailed answer, but because you've got revenue sharing coming into play, and you've got NIL, and that's still kind of a gray area how that's all going to come to work together. Do you want larger rosters? Is that going to be advantageous for depth? Yes, but if you want to divide up that revenue sharing pie, are players going to be looking around saying, do we need another 10, 15, 20 players in that locker room?
That is a great question. It's one that I've had conversations with. I've heard it on podcasts. Nobody has a definitive answer. Mark, I think you were on to a very, very important topic because, okay, let's use an example. Old school USC student body right. It's a famous.
You go on the bench. We'll get you in a couple of years.
Yeah. But fullback. Well, maybe you take one now.
Right.
For goal line and short yardage guy, you can use him on punt team, kickoff and stuff. And he plays 6 snaps a game, 2 or 3 in the first half, 2 or 3 in the second half. Short yardage and goal line. That's all you're going to play. They know what's coming, but we're better than them. We're going to use you. That's still money out of the kitty.
Right.
USC's pockets are insane. I don't think it'll matter to them that much. They got so much money. But what about Oregon State? That's a different animal. Oregon's got the greatest booster of all time in Phil Knight. Doesn't matter. For most schools, the 90, 95 percentile, it does matter. And they got to make really good decisions.
Yeah.
Because that second, third guy that's a walk-on, I don't know if they have to give them money. I don't even know the rule on it yet. Because they'll change it in 5 minutes.
Yeah.
But if that causes a problem in your locker room, you probably have a thin-skinned locker room. Like if you're worried about what a walk-on or a guy that's just like the 88th guy is, they take 88 scholarships, then you're probably not a great player. Anyway, that's something else to think. Do you think Reggie Bush gave a you-know-what? If anybody was getting a payment or if somebody got more attention or what? I used to talk to Reggie, really smart guy. He did what he did. If you didn't like it, too bad, try and stop it. That was it.
Right.
It was A to B. That's why he was great. Don't sweat the small stuff. That's what I would tell most of the coaches, because if you have a bunch of guys worried about it, it's an issue. But then again, I guess there could be a school that's really trying to pay some of those back end players. If they do that, then there could be some problems. But again, outside of a fullback, maybe an extra tight end or something, I don't think there's going to be a lot of it. But if they're, if SC could get an extra offensive tackle on there, like that's been a sore spot O-line over the last 5 years, maybe they do that. But I you know what? Most of the elite schools, it won't matter. Like Notre Dame, USC, Texas, they got so much money. Those kids are making a ton anyway.
Well, and again, I'm looking at this from just a playing time perspective. I mean, these kids want to play, and you can only travel 70 players, 74 players for away games. You have a 2 deep. The NFL does it with a 53-man roster.
That is correct.
You've understood why college needs an 85 scholarship roster, and they're thinking about expanding it another 20. I've never understood that.
Well, I guess it's just because it's such a developmental sport. That's my opinion. But, some of the young kids, they're just not ready physically. The difference of 22 and 18 in age with college weight room is pretty big. But I think especially if you're a MAC school, it's important because they're all developmental. They got a bunch of raw kids. SC, you don't necessarily need it as much, but Miami of Ohio probably.
Okay. You got one more segment to go. All right, Brian. So as far as recruiting, just recruiting only, underrated or overrated? Lincoln Riley.
I would say a little bit underrated because he can close pretty darn well.
Okay.
I just know that from when he was recruiting at Oklahoma, he would get kids LSU, Texas A&M wanted to go north. No offense to the state of Oklahoma, it's not real exciting. Okay, it's why he left and he went to LA. It's not. I know Oklahoma fans don't want to hear that, but it's not a state I enjoy driving through. I'll just put it that way. He can win there. And it's not, I mean, it's a tradition rich program, but it's not the same as winning in LA, Austin, Baton Rouge. Like it's just the way it is. And he won a lot of those battles. He beat Ohio State for kids, etc. Now, that's the one-on-one part. The backside of that is, do I like his strategic planning? No, I do not. We've already talked about it. You need to be not looking so far away. Sometimes the old phrase, be careful for what you lost, because you can't get it back.
Right.
Within a 50-mile radius of that campus, you can have a top 25 program. And in some years, you can have a top 5. Yeah, if there's a quarterback, you got to have a quarterback. But if you can get a quarterback locally, and most of the time you can in LA.
Oh, they're down the street. You just got to turn your neck. You're going to find one. I mean, that's
you know what I mean? Like this year, they got to struggle, Mark. They got to go to Folsom. It's up by Sacramento to get Ryder Lyons, who I think is as good a player as there is in the country in high school football. Love that kid. He's a great player. But he's still in California.
Right.
If they get him, he could win the Heisman in that system. He's a great athlete, got a cannon, super smart. He's a guy you want to put in front of the camera. He's what the NFL wants in terms of a spokesperson. To a T. I've been around him enough to know that's a guy. Don't make it complicated. Get the local kid. So if you get top 10 quarterback every single year, one of them is going to hit with his coaching acumen at quarterback. That's the starting point. And O-line, D-line, every position's that way. There's no reason they should not have a top 10 roster at each position if they get half the kids they want in state.
Trust me, I don't think anybody was upset that USC had to settle for Husan Longstreet instead of Juju Lewis. So that was that question. Why is he going across the country for Juju when you got the kid in your backyard who wants to be a Trojan? It's that type of thing. Why are you slow playing it? Why are you testing people's interest? It just didn't make sense.
Mark, I would 100% agree. But again, I'm a simpleton.
Yeah, well, me too. I think the older you get, the more simple you become. So I become very simple lately. Did you think that, Lincoln Riley is known for quarterbacks, wide receivers. I mean, in one class, you brought in Deuce Robinson, Zachariah Branch, Jacoby Lane, Mekhi Lemon. Those last two names were the two who were, I guess, weren't supposed to be as prolific as Zachariah and Deuce. Those guys were number one in their positions, but all four of them were kind of considered number one wide receivers at USC. Why do you think it didn't work out with Deuce and Zachariah at USC as much as you can see Mekhi and Jacoby? They seem to have it. And you now have Deuce at Florida State. What's Mike Norvell going to do with him?
He's going to play boundary, and they're going to throw a lot of jump balls to him, I bet you, based on what they've done in the past. They had a lot of success with it with Johnny Wilson, but I don't know if he's Johnny Wilson or not. But as for Mike Mekhi, I saw him play with Nico in 7-on-7 a couple of years ago. He was a tremendous route runner. I questioned whether he was a burner, but he always made the right step.
Right.
He's the most annoying guy to guard. This is not a fair comparison, but Jerry Rice always knew where his next foot was going to be, and he didn't waste any steps. Best route runner of all time. You could make that argument. He turned out okay. So, you know what I mean? Like, Mekhi Lemon wins 50-50 battles. He's strong, but he beats you to the point of attack. He was the only guy in that Notre Dame USC game that I thought could really take on Notre Dame's corners and just beat them with just pure route run, not just physical skill. His route running was sick. Like, he could turn guys around. And Notre Dame's secondary is all going to play in the NFL. And he killed them. Absolutely killed them. That's the difference to me. I think that Deuce has a ways to go with his route running because he's 6'5", 6'6". He's a great kid. Everybody likes him. He could be 1,000 reception receiver in the NFL if he figures out all the nuances. But Mekhi is ahead of him in that regard. There ain't no doubt about it. Like, as a route runner, if you're a kid and you want to learn, go throw on the YouTube footage of Mekhi in high school as well as a Trojan. You're going to learn something. That's the biggest difference for me.
Yeah, I see Mekhi. He's going to lead the team in yardage. I see Jacoby as the guy he's going to be your touchdown maker. All he does is catch touchdowns like Chris Carter used to do. He's got some freaky athleticism.
Oh, he's a really special player.
If he ever decides to dedicate himself to the game, the sky's the limit for him. So yeah, it was interesting that it just never came together. You had Miller Moss back there, and you had Jaden Mayava. You have all these tools on the outside, but it didn't seem to click. And I kind of likened it to when the Lakers had to make a decision between Shaq and Kobe. They chose Kobe, and because they saw the production, what he's capable of doing, what we're talking about with Makai and with Jacoby, as opposed to Zachariah, who they tried everything with. It just didn't work out. Too many drops. He's now going to Georgia. And Deuce, it just never seemed like he knew how strong and how big and how fast he was and how to use his body. So hopefully, like I said, you guys can get that out of him down there in Tallahassee, because he is a special athlete. There's no doubt about it.
He's fun to watch. He's fun to watch, and he's the kind of guy you root for. Good guy.
Yeah, oh, absolutely. Really good young man. I love talking to him. All right, so if USC wins 9 or 10 games this year, this is the last question. Where does their recruiting class end up?
If they win 9 or 10, I'd be surprised if it's not top 12, probably top 10. Because 2 factors. Number one, that means Lincoln's off the hot seat, at least initially. And B, it also makes the Coliseum come alive, etc. Unofficial visits turn into official. We both know big city, Miami and LA, those 2 cities, there's no way around it. It's fair weather fans, 100%.
Or they ain't showing up, right?
That's right. So that place gets rocking. They'll go nuts. The question is, though, can they still close on all these California kids? Did they do the ground? And I don't know. I don't live out there. I don't get to talk to them. But again, this is a very good year in the state of California.
Yeah.
If they take advantage, let's say they win 9 games. If they finish outside the top 10, that would be more on the staff. Because if they sign 12 kids from the state of California, mixed in with, Xavier Griffin and 2 other kids down south, 4 kids from Texas and, 1 from Seattle, 1 from Chicago. That's going to be a top 10 class.
Yeah. Right now, they've got 9 commits. 6 of them are from California. It's pretty DB heavy right now, but they're all like number 1 at their position type of guys. So
RJ Sermons and those guys are good.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
and they can get Brandon Arrington down there from San Diego to latch on.
He's a good player too. Really good player.
Hopefully he is ready to play football more than Damani Jackson, because to me they're similar type of player. Fast. They have all the measurables, but for whatever reason, it didn't work out at USC for that number 1 player from modern day. So, Brian, thank you so much for doing this. Do me a favor, tell everybody where they can find you daily and why they need to be watching your shows.
Recruiting, NIL, and the transfer portal. That's what my show is. It's called The Portal. You can find, if you go to YouTube, just get to YouTube, type in LO, The Portal. It'll pull up. It's new, so I haven't got a lot of traction yet. But you can also find us on Spotify, Apple, Amazon Music, anywhere else you get them. Take them with you to the gym or anywhere on the go. Again, it's The Portal, and it's 7 days a week. I have podcasts every single day. National recruiting, look at it from transfer portal perspective, USC, Michigan, Florida, anybody you could imagine.
The hardest man. Wow, working hard out there 7 days a week. Make sure you get some sleep. All right, I will be back with another episode of Locked on USC tomorrow. That's what we do 5 times a week out here. And if there's anything breaking, you know where to come. So until then, everyone, you know what to do.